Welcome back to Sick Sad Lit, the podcast where we talk to the writers who pull us into the strange, unsettling, and unforgettable corners of literature. I'm your host, Jen Eastwood, and today I'm joined by one of the most distinctive and daring voices in contemporary fiction, who is also one of my absolute favourite writers of all time, Ottessa Moshfegh. If you've ever read McGlue, Eileen, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Death in Her Hands, or Lapvona, you know her work is unflinchingly honest, darkly funny, and obsessed with the lives of characters who don't fit neatly into the world. Her debut, Eileen, won the Penn Hemingway Award, was shortlisted for the Booker, and was recently adapted into a film starring fellow Kiwi Thomasin McKenzie and Anne Hathaway. Her second novel, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, is about an unnamed woman attempting to sleep away her life through pharmaceuticals, and it became a cult classic and viral phenomenon. Across novels, short stories, and essays, Moshfegh has built a reputation for writing fiction that refuses to look away from discomfort. Instead, it embraces it, pushing us to consider what it means to be human in all our mess and contradiction. In our conversation, we dig into her body of work, the evolution of her writing, and the themes that haunt her fiction: alienation, identity, transformation, and the strange liberation that comes from telling stories about people society prefers to ignore. So let's get into it. Here's Ottessa Moshfegh. Just to get started, what is something you've read or seen or even overheard recently that stuck with you?
Interesting question. Very difficult to answer.
Is that a bit deep to get started?
I guess the most recent thing that's stuck with me is I'm in Taos, New Mexico for another week. I've been here for 5 weeks, and I got a really bad facial this morning. God, it was like the worst facial. She was wearing gloves, like plastic gloves that were too big. So it was just like being touched by latex. And then the thing that she said that stuck with me was that she couldn't offer me any water because she'd been really busy that week. Because she also runs a paver company. And I was like, a what? She was like, pavers?
Paving stones?
Yeah. So it stuck with me. What can I say?
That's definitely, that would stick with me too. Oh, that sounds like a sensory nightmare, to be honest. Like big, oversized gloves.
Yeah.
And she couldn't offer you water because she'd been busy with her paving business. Okay. Are you in Taos for work at the moment, or what's bringing you to New Mexico?
I wanted to go somewhere with a contained idea for what I'm going to do. And my idea was to come here and get back into working on my novel, which I've done. And Taos is someplace that I've been a couple of times. I haven't spent this much time here, but it's really peaceful. It's beautiful. There isn't a lot to do. There are a couple of really good grocery stores, and it's a 2-day drive from Palm Springs, which is where I've been living, which is much hotter than here right now. So I'm okay.
What about your dogs? Do you miss your dogs? Are they with you?
I have 2 of them here.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What kind of dogs do you have, by the way? Because you write about them a lot, and I also have a dog who I take regular kiss breaks throughout the day to see. So I would like to know what kind of dogs you have.
We have 5 dogs. 3 of them are blonde. 2 of them are dark-haired. One of them is a cattle dog, and she's the oldest. I think she's like 12 or 13. She's beautiful, very smart, very grouchy. And then I have my dog, Walter. He was the dog that I brought into the family. And I got Walter because my sister got Walter's sister and took Walter along with the sister. And I was like, that's my dog. And took Walter. And then Walter's sister had puppies during the pandemic. So we got 2 of those children.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. And they're just mutts. I mean, they're like terrier poodle, schnauzer, shih tzu, chihuahua, everything. And then we got a fifth dog at the very start of this year, a runaway that just showed up in the desert randomly, starving to death. And she has heart failure. And like it was difficult, obviously, to encounter a dying animal like that. And then also a difficult decision to be like, God, do we take her in and just watch her die, you know? But weirdly, she's doing great. I mean, she's on a lot of medication, but we've really seen her come back to life, and she's getting along. I have no idea what kind of dog she is. Maybe like half pit bull, half a million other things. I don't know. I like mutts.
Yeah. Yeah, they are very special. My parents also, we always have had so many dogs as well because they foster animals and then also they're bad at giving them away once they're old enough. So you had puppies while you were writing Lapvona because you wrote Lapvona during COVID, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I cannot imagine having two puppies, which is so intense, like having two newborns and then also working on your novel. What was that like?
Writing Lapvona was very interesting in that it was a process that was different from writing any other book I've written. And by the way, the book I'm writing now is like this protracted off and on thing that is also very different. But Lapvona was like, I worked on it for 2 or 3 months on the first draft in a very concentrated way. No more than, I don't know, an hour or two a day. Kind of just pushing myself to get to the end of a draft. And it was really, really fun. I haven't had fun like that writing a book before. It was just, I don't know, the process was entertaining. And the characters were all so perfectly odd to me. I don't know. I mean, it was I don't even remember the puppies. I just remember I would shut my door and just like get into bed with my computer and work and then open the door and sort of leave it there. Yeah.
It's your body of work. There's my interpretation. There is kind of a consistent theme of characters being trapped, often in prisons of their own creation, but sometimes literal as well. So in McGlue, he's imprisoned in the bottom of the boat, but also by his alcoholism and his addiction. Eileen, she's imprisoned in a way with her father, as well as in her own self-obsessive neuroses. The narrator in My Year of Rest and Relaxation isolates herself in grief and sedation. Merrick confined in his body, but also with his abusive father. And then Vesta in Death in Her Hands, trapped in her grief, unresolved grief, and her obsession with figuring out what happened to Magda. Would you mind speaking to how the idea of obsession or self-destruction can act as kind of a psychological confinement and why that fascinates you?
Well, I think it fascinates me in fiction because when you put someone in a confined space, they become a more concentrated version of themselves. And, you know, what's funny about Eileen is she also works at a prison. I mean, so it's like the theme is there completely. And I think that when, you know, if you've ever been stuck anywhere, you notice that the things that bother you a lot. And the things that you want so much because you know you can't have it in a way. Isolation in any way can feel like a prison. Even if you're in the, you know, you're in the countryside, you can feel trapped. And I think when a mind is under pressure, it will kind of transform and start telling stories to entertain itself. And I sort of think that's what fiction is like people trapped in their minds, needing to tell stories. But I think, I don't know, I mean, I've always felt trapped in one way or another. But I don't know. I mean, I don't really linger on that feeling personally, you know. It's more of a scenario.
Did you notice any shift in, I guess, I'm thinking about how you had the best time writing Lapvona during COVID, which is quite an interesting juxtaposition given it was quite literally like a lockdown and in isolation. And yet you kind of had your most fun writing your book during that time. Do you think that that experience of enjoying that process was a coincidence given the book you were writing, or do you think that those circumstances actually contributed to that?
I don't think I would have written Lapvona had we not been in a pandemic. I wasn't planning on writing that book. I was actually working on a different book. And things were shifting so dramatically. I mean, I was in California, and in the US, it was like you could just watch from, your couch. Social politics, the economy, the population, everything was falling apart. Huge dynamic changes across the board. And yet we were all just sort of at home getting, gaining 5 pounds or whatever we were doing. And I mean, some of us were home. Some of us had to go out and work. Yeah. But I'm one of the people that just stayed home and did nothing except write this book. And I don't know. I mean, there's an occasion for everything.
I've been thinking lately, I read your interview with, or your conversation with Carmen Maria Machado on The Guardian, and there was a bit of conversation around the similarities, I guess, or like how Willem is reminiscent of certain world leaders, I guess, if you will. How do you feel about Lapvona today, given the current political climate? Would you still write that book today, or would it be different?
I don't know. It's impossible to say because I've already written it. Like, I wouldn't write it again. No, I think it's just an impossible question to answer. It was really the situation, and also a creative curiosity. It was the first novel I wrote in the third person. Wanting to escape to another time and land, wanting to sort of play out through fiction the worst I could imagine, in order to find something to hold on to. And the way that I feel about it now is I'm very proud of it. And I'm glad I don't have to write it again and deal with publishing it again, because it was a very unhappy book to put out. It got a lot of bad reviews, and made me feel really distanced from the culture, which was a inspiring disappointment. But yeah, I wouldn't, no regrets, but I wouldn't do it again.
I loved that book, and Lapvona was actually the first of your work that was recommended to me, and I went to the bookstore to buy it and they were sold out. And so the local bookshop owner, he said, you should read this one, which was My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which is what they did have in store at the time, which did feel kind of like divine timing in a way, because I read that book when I had severe carpal tunnel syndrome, and I was forced to take a month off work, and it was so bad. I couldn't drive. I couldn't wash my hair. I was like in so much pain, couldn't do anything except I couldn't even read on my Kindle because I couldn't like tap the page. My hand was useless. And so I just read a lot, which I do anyway, but the timing of that particular book at that time just was amazing. But the point being, I tried to get my hands on a copy of Lapvona for so long, and I had to order it in because it was sold out everywhere. And it was the second of your work that I read, and I loved it so much. And I was so struck by the skill of writing two so vastly different novels. That still really gripped me and really stayed with me. So I was really surprised when I'd read in some of your previous interviews that it hadn't been well received. And I wonder if maybe the public, I don't know, were still too sore about COVID and how traumatizing the world was for a while there to appreciate it. But all of that to say, it's not really a question in that. I just want to say that I loved it, and I was really surprised to hear that there were people who didn't appreciate it, because everybody I've ever spoken to loved it.
I don't really think it was because people were tired or depressed because of COVID. I think that everybody wanted me to write another book about a woman because that's the thing of value. That's a special thing that I can do. I wrote Eileen. I wrote My Year of Rest and Relaxation. There's good things to say about women protagonists and, unlikable female characters, and this being reflected in that, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I mean, I can't help but think, because I'm very arrogant and I think it's a really, really, really good book, that there's just not so much space when you have a certain readership. They just want you to give them the same thing, only new and fresh and cool and surprising. I'm just totally not interested in repeating myself in any way. So yeah, I mean, I think that book is very punk. I think it's really real. It's very, there's a tactile reality at hand. And the end is probably the closest to what I want to accomplish in a book ever. That the sentiment that the book lands on the last page, I think it's just scary to people. It is scary. I mean, it is scary. It's in some ways, it's a horror novel. Horror and comedy and satire and drama and, all these other things. I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Do you think if I had been a guy and this was my debut, would people be engaging with it as a political novel and really taking it seriously? Because no one did that.
I think it's so interesting too, given your first book, McGlue, which I have a beautiful copy behind me because it was re-released. And I think it's a masterpiece, truly, exquisite masterpiece. And the way you write from a male perspective in both McGlue and Lapvona, I think is so fascinating and interesting. And I wonder if, off the back of My Year of Rest and Relaxation, how it kind of drew in this cult-like fandom of sad girls, or this sad girl cult, that they kind of, that they would expect there to be more sad girl literate. I really hate the term sad girl lit because I think it's so infantilizing. But maybe, that they wanted more of the same to kind of indulge the glamorization of the self-destructive behavior.
I think you're right. I mean, I think it's my job is really different from the job of selling books or getting reviews. My job is to write what I can write as well as I can. And everything else is sort of up to an industry and a market, etc. I don't think the people giving Lapvona bad reviews were people who were real champions of My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I think there's a sense of people don't really know what to do unless you teach them how to handle being uncomfortable. They don't really know how to ingest or digest a different kind of story. And I don't know. I mean, I think we're living in such conservative times. We all just want, another episode of The Real Housewives of Atlanta or whatever. And I'm not interested in that. And I also, I keep changing, which is going to disappoint people who think they've discovered an author they really like and know and understand, and whatever. The next book is going to be not for you, maybe.
That's what makes you so exciting. I do enjoy the thrill of not knowing where you're going to take us each time. That's what makes it so interesting. And yet you've got such a distinct tone or style throughout. I think you've said before, given the question, would you write under a pen name, that people would just know it was you anyway, because you do have a distinct tone of voice. And that is what I seek out in your work, that's however you want to produce your art is part of the thrill, because you'll always have that thread of your distinct tone of voice, your signature in your work. Something I'm curious about, you said that readers didn't really get Eileen when it was first published. I think you were done so dirty during that time with some of the press around it. And then almost as a reaction to that, when people could only focus on Eileen's behaviors, that you thought, well, I will write a disgusting protagonist who's a model, and then you still think she's gross. Did that work?
Yeah.
Does anybody think that she's gross or no?
Oh, no one thinks she's gross. Everyone wants to be her. I mean, it's just proof that if you're blonde, if you're white, blonde, and skinny and pretty, you have the privilege of being as big of an asshole as you can be, and people will still admire you.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Like, it's such an interesting case study.
I mean, it's interesting and it's also so boring. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It's like, yes, in a way, all right. I can accept that we're all brainwashed in a similar way, you know? And I could be very judgmental about it. The thing that I wanted to say was that it's important that I talk about myself in very grandiose terms sometimes, because the way that I feel is that I'm up against a lot of negativity. Like I feel like I've had a really smooth road in terms of finding an amazing publisher in the States and in the UK and abroad. And I've been lucky with the enormous attention that my work has been getting. But there's also just people love to hate women. I mean, it's just fun, you know, like it's more fun to pay extra attention to a woman you hate than to just kind of like someone male. And I don't know, it's also interesting and very boring. It's amazing to me that we've gotten so far, but people still can't recognize all of the ways that we're like completely uncivilized. I don't know. In the context of what's happening right now on planet Earth, this is a very small issue, but I do have great resentment.
I think that's fair. I do think that's fair. I feel like if you're reading, why do you read if not to be challenged or if not to be like just read like romance if you don't want to have to think, or if you don't want to.
Exactly.
Like there's so many other books you could choose. You've said when you're working on a story, you feel like the story already exists and you're more of a conduit to tell it. So how do your characters tend to reveal themselves to you?
I mean, usually out of necessity. It's sort of like I'm on their team. The characters also want the story to be as powerful, dynamic, funny, and true as I do. So when I'm working on a draft of a story or a novel or anything, I'll always be asking myself, like, well, what's the next dimension of this person? And then they'll immediately say, you know, the thing that you thought you knew that you glossed over so easily, that's not it. There's another thing. So I just keep kind of like poking and prodding, and eventually people open up or shut down. I mean, that's another thing that can happen. But I don't really think about my characters in psychological terms at all. It's more like inhabiting them as a mood and a voice, and how they exist in relationship to the other characters and the space that I've created in the fiction. And what are they in the book to do? You know, where do we meet them? Why do they need to be in the story? And then where do we leave them? Looking at their trajectories is also helpful, but that usually happens on like a second draft. Oh, I didn't see this, but now I do. And I get to know people better.
Have you ever been tempted to revisit a character to see what they're up to now?
Never.
Really? I think about them. I think about Vesta. I feel like she would be my grandma, honestly. I think about her, and I do think about older Eileen as well.
Yeah. The book I'm writing right now, this is the first time that I've experienced this, actually. And it's like the characters feel so real and so other than me that I started thinking about, like, I wonder what they're doing right now. Like, as I'm trying to fall asleep, you know, like they've started to exist in the reality of the book in a really real way. And when I think about them, they don't feel like things that I've made up anymore, you know? They feel like characters from somebody else's life. Somebody else knows them, and I'm sort of the go-between describing them and narrating their lives.
I'm always really struck by how distinct and unique your characters are. Even thinking about McGlue and all the different characters in McGlue, like it just blows my mind that the same author, is crafting or bringing to life the characters in McGlue, and then also in My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and then Lapvona. It's so fascinating to me how they are so different, like so different. How do you know how to round them out and make sure that their real true voice comes through and not sound too much like another character or something? Does that ever become an issue for you? Is that something that you've dealt with, or does that clarity of voice come through to you during the drafting process quite easily?
I never think about that. It's sort of like, you know how like you'll never really know your parents because they're not allowing you full access, and also they were already grown when you showed up, and you have a totally subjective experience that has to do with your survival and all this stuff. You can never meet them for the first time as an adult and see them clearly. It's a little bit like that, but trying to imagine what they're really like. You know, what does the neighbor experience when he experiences my mother, rather than, you know, the messy, tangled, gorgeous love mess, which is my relationship with her. I have to be on the inside and on the outside at the same time. And I've never met anyone who's the same as anyone, actually. So it doesn't ever occur to me that might accidentally happen, you know?
It's true. That's very true. On your Substack, you've started publishing scanned copies of your composition notebooks from high school, which is so fun to me because I always had a similar kind of notebook with me throughout my years, which I still keep, and it's always like a fun little time capsule. But what I was really struck by with yours is the first one I read was the 1996 one, and how even then, when you were 15, that early tone, like style and tone of voice was already there in like your short stories, like thinking of the fat man who knocked on the door to tell him to turn the TV down. I'm like, oh my God, that's so incredible to me that that is clearly like a young Ottessa piece. Like it has, you can see the beginnings of where you're going. Were you already very sure of your voice? Or like, when did you feel sure and confident in your voice and style as a writer? And what age did that kind of start to take shape for you?
I mean, it really happened bit by bit over time. There wasn't like a moment where I was like, ta-da, I'm deciding. You know, I still feel like I'm changing, hopefully getting better. I mean, that's really just the point. I mean, that's why I keep writing. Like, I feel like everything I write, when I'm done, I'm like, oh, that was a good exercise for the next thing. There was something that happened when I moved to Los Angeles. I was focusing just on short stories. I'd written McGlue, but it was sort of like in a drawer. Like, no one's ever going to publish this crazy novella, you know? I had written it during graduate school as my thesis, and I needed a big project. And, you know, everything else I'd been writing in between McGlue, those 2 years, those were short stories, but they were sort of like bird seeds scattered. I mean, there wasn't anything that I was like, yes, decisively, this is what I want to do in short story, until I wrote Mr. Wu, which ended up being, I think it's the second story in my collection, Homesick for Another World. That was the story where I was like, oh shit, I can be funny and precise. I can actually create a plot. You know, there's very little plot, but there's something that happens in that story. The character goes through something. It wasn't an ambient piece, which a lot of my other short fictions had been. It wasn't kind of hedging in any way. It was just very, very straightforward and felt real. I mean, yes, these are all like really boring ways to describe being able to identify something in my own writing that I liked. You know, it's like, well, this is exciting. And I never really thought that I was a funny writer until I started writing those stories, you know? I wrote the Mr. Wu, and then I wrote Bettering Myself, which is probably the story I worked on the longest in my entire life. Like, I worked on that for at least a year. And I mean, I was kind of stuck in it. I knew I needed to get it in order to move on. And then when I did, it just seemed like there was more of a sense of ease about what I was going to take on in the short story. I sort of understood the parameters, understood my relationship with my protagonists. I know how close am I getting, and how much compassion, sympathy, and judgment am I going to have? What's my role as the author versus what's my role as the narrator, puppeting as a narrator? The relationship just sort of clarified. And then when I finished the book of short stories, it was very clear to me that I was done with that relationship and that precise angle into the humor and dynamics of like a human psyche. I don't know. I mean, maybe you could say, oh, all of your books have always been doing the same thing. But to me, there was like a marked shift when I finished the last story, which is A Better Place. But that is a little bit already sort of a departure in its style from the rest of the book. Yeah, it felt like a graduation. And the first book that I wrote after that was my year of rest and relaxation. Or I had already started my year of rest and relaxation, actually. It's weird. When I go back and like look at the calendar of my projects, it's strange to me that I was concurrently writing Death in Her Hands and the last several stories of the collection, Weird. But sometimes, it's sort of like keeping the left hand busy while the right hand is doing something else. And then you look at your left hand and you're like, whoa, how did I make this sculpture without really focusing and overworking it? And that was sort of what Death in Her Hands was. It's like, I give myself total permission to write anything, because the purpose of writing that book was really to occupy myself while I was going through a hard time. And I needed something that was, yes, like there's a levity in Death in Her Hands, ironically. It sounds like a heavy book, but there's something very silly and playful about it. There's also, all this like kind of campy genre referencing. There's a small town, little Twin Peaksy. Like there are a lot of things where I'm like, okay, this is manageable. And at the same time, this is about a woman grappling with having wasted her life. Wasted. And the devastating horror of that. Like the realization of, oh my God, life was so much bigger and more precious than I ever thought it was. And it took me this long just to get a peek. It was a lot to hold. I needed something. I needed the vehicle of this playful genre meta thing. Like she's a detective and a writer and a da, and she, takes herself very seriously, and she's really stupid in some ways. Like that was all really important. And I'm sure was keeping part of my brain busy while I was, approaching the end, kind of a death of my collection, which was, I have to say, really heart-wrenching. It had been, I write a novel every 3-4 years, I don't know, but those stories are really the product of all of my writing. I was a short story writer. Novels are still new to me. I've written hundreds of short stories. The cadence and velocity and size and the spaciousness of a short story, the urgency of it, the song of it, all of it. I mean, it is, I think, just like the most divine form of writing and fiction. I love novels too, but novels are much more of a project between me and the universe, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like a short story is, I feel like it's coming. It's like an arrow has pierced my heart, and I am describing exactly the pain and how, of what it feels like. And a novel is me walking through, I don't know, a revolution and taking notes and being shown things and being made to experience things I didn't know I was getting into, but it's all in service of the book. So here we go. You asked me, would I write Lapvona now? I was a different person when I wrote Lapvona. I had not experienced all the shit I've experienced since writing it, and I wouldn't have experienced all this stuff had I not written. It's just, we can have conversations about writing that are really fun and interesting for other writers, but the truth is, like, what I'm doing is really self-serving, like I'm writing so that I can live. Like, I don't have another way to process my life, the time that I spend alive on Earth. I don't. I measure it in books,
How early did you start writing? Because in terms of like that way of processing life and making sense of your existence and what's going on in your head, how early on did you, because I know that you were a pianist growing up with your parents as classical musicians, did you turn to story very early on?
Yes. I mean, writing, even though writing is something that you do and you like leave words on a page that are visible, it felt like way more private than music for me. Partly, I found privacy in really mastering the version of American English that I write in, and it's not what my parents speak. I have my own language. It was venturing into an art form that they had never tried, ever. Fiction was a way to, well, I've always been a very private person, ironically, because I would just blab in every interview and on every stage will just say anything that I feel like saying. But my family knows I'm extremely secretive. And writing fiction was a way to sort of hide my truth, to camouflage it in somebody else's story, my truth in terms of my feelings. And I still don't really know how to have feelings without writing. I mean, it really is sort of like a weird synesthesia. Like I'll have a feeling and it will turn into, in an absolutely non-literal sense, a sound and a gesture. Sort of like looking at air frozen in time. I can't describe it. And I'll be like, oh, okay, I understand that posture and that direction and that voice. And then suddenly the features of the fiction will come to light. What is it that, it's very hard to describe, which is why I have to write whole books to get at what I'm trying to do. I'm like, I think it's more like this, and I didn't know how to connect in any other way. I mean, I felt like I could accomplish that as a pianist if I had gotten really, really, really good. Maybe one day I could get that across. But, I wasn't a composer. I was playing dead, like white European men music. Incredible, incredible. I learned so much, but it wasn't my song, And I think that's important. I mean, I don't know. I have so much respect for classical musicians, and I've gotten into some arguments with people like contemporary composers and people who are in music now, because I guess it's not so fashionable to be really into classical music. But I honestly don't think that I would be a writer had I not studied stuff that was that sophisticated and written for divinity. I mean, that's such a weird miracle that all this music exists because these patrons were like, write us music for church times. We need better music. What's the best music? Now people are writing books for whatever reason they want to write books. But the books that are getting popular, that are like hitting and having lasting shelf time, are the ones that win awards that are topical, that mark a certain moment in culture. And it's really the relationship between what readers want and what writers write, I think, is very dangerous. Like, that's a rickety bridge. I don't ever want to write what readers want to read. That's what television is. I mean, I would write for TV one day. I love television.
I think you'd be such a good satire writer. I could see that.
I get very worked up when I think about the contrast between talking about like my life and my work and then talking about things like the media and the industry and readers and bookstores and awards and things. Like it's a toxic alchemy when you put those things together. I have to keep them really far away from each other, which is harder and harder to do when you're promoting a book. Like you just basically can't, and it can be, I don't know. Part of what I love about Substack is that I can publish anything I want whenever I want, and I never have to say anything about it. Like people could ask me about it, but I'm not on a circuit. I'm actually just like an artist weirdo, not a book celebrity or whatever on TikTok.
Your Substack is about the only one that I actually read because it really does remind me of the early to mid 2000s era of blogging, which is where I got my starts in writing. Oh my God. I was a prolific blogger to no one, by the way. Nobody was reading me, but I just had this sense of urgency to say all these things all the time. And I was so free. I don't think I've ever been so free in terms of writing as I was back then I maybe had 2, maybe 5 readers. And one of them would have been my mum, another one my best friend, and then 3 were probably bullies from school who liked to pick on me about it. But it didn't matter. Like I was so free and excited to explore language, and I wanted to get better as a writer, and it was so magical. And in this era, I had hoped that Substack would be like that again for me now, but I found personally, I just don't have that same relationship to it, writing on it, and also really like going through the news feed. I just find it so overwhelming. But your Substack is basically the only one I read because it still has that sense of magic to me of what those early years of blogging and sharing, just like those different creative ideas that come through, like what have you been working on lately, or what, just whatever. And it feels like such a nice little pocket of the internet, and so much more valuable to consume than like if you were really active on Instagram. I feel like we're so lucky to be able to have that access. And I've been wondering this about you in terms of you've always been very private online, which is quite remarkable in this era of social media. And I know in the publishing world these days, people always say, especially like particularly for new writers, you have to have like some sort of online presence in order to get published, which is so gross and so annoying. But how do you balance the isolation required to write and not lose your mind, because you are quite a public figure now, with the visibility and connection of having such a large readership and having to promote a book?
There are 2 different settings. There's like the cheesy public version of me that like command an audience, and then there's the interior real me that is writing alone. I'm not doing it live on stage, I'm like really in it, and I'm sure it doesn't look glamorous. I mean, does this look glamorous? Like, yes, I've been sitting on this couch for 5 weeks, but I also so appreciate all of the really, really, really nice things that you've said about my work. Thank you. There is also just the major fact of I live in the United States where most people never read books. And I am totally anonymous, If I go into a bookstore and I'm like, hi, my name is Ottessa Moshfegh, they might be like, oh, that sounds familiar. Wait. And that's happened to me. Like, here's my credit card for buying this book. Like, and they'll look at it and they'll be like, Ottessa? That's the only place I'm recognized. Everywhere else, I have a weird name. How old am I? I don't know. I think when people look at me, they sort of like ask themselves a couple of questions. How to identify this person? Oh, that seems too complicated. Whatever. She's just an outlier. And I get to exist in, the marginalia of what people notice, and I get to watch them very closely. I don't really have a very big life when I'm writing a book, especially in the last few years. I've barely seen friends. I mean, the pandemic was one thing that, I've been very, very isolated. I don't really like doing stuff. I
Me
mean, like I
neither.
don't like going places.
Mm-mm.
I'm a workaholic for sure. If someone's like, would you get on a plane to go give this talk to these people and then get on another plane to go do research for this and that? Sure. But like, do you want to go out to dinner? God, no. You know? That's kind of the person I've become these days. And I'm sure it will change, but there is this sense, like when I'm in New York, there's this, I get this, I lived in New York for a really long time. Well, not that long, but I moved there when I was 17, and I think I left 10 years later.
That's
But
a long time, especially in the scheme of your life at that age.
yeah, true. When I'm there, I'm only ever there for work. And I'm there because I've been invited. And I can feel this disgusting ego creeping up, being like, oh, like I'll get my Uber. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'll just ask them to do it for me, because I'm doing this other thing and I'm busy. It's hilarious to me that I can be such a self-important asshole, and very revealing and refreshing at times to be totally materialistic and superficial and spend other people's money in hotel rooms, Then I get home and I'm like, ew. The best thing about going on tour is being in a cold hotel room, getting into bed and watching hours of Forensic Files. Do you know that show?
I do.
Yeah.
I love that show.
It's always on. I fall asleep to it. It fills my dreams. I love it.
Do you have really good sleeps when you're in other hotel rooms?
God, I never have really good sleeps, ever.
Yeah, neither. I actually don't either. I don't. I really envy people who do. The success that you've had with your recent books, has that made it harder to write without second guessing yourself? Are you more sure of yourself and more comfortable in yourself, or less because of the visibility?
A little bit of both. I mean, it really, everyone has their vulnerable spots. And when I'm really invested and in a project, like in a book, I'm not thinking about what people are going to say. I'm 95% thinking about what I need to do next, and then maybe 5% thinking about how this will move someone. Will it? Who? What's important about this? Because it's really unpredictable. It really is. Like when I was writing my Year of Rest and Relaxation, I kind of knew it was going to be a hit. And I knew because I felt like what I had to say about society and people in New York was like the shit that only the coolest people know to mention to one another. Everybody else is trying to fit in, And it's like the coolest, smartest people who are like, that's so lame. And that's who I was. I was just, everything was lame. That's bullshit. No, that's bullshit. That's bullshit too. Nope, bullshit. And it's like, okay, this is a good place to put this because people they like to be on the inside, Here's special access. And guess what? She's tall, blonde, and pretty. And you want to be her. And you want to fuck her. But
And
you
she's
can't.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if she's terrible, but I mean, she's very sick in the head.
Honestly, the reason I love that book so much, is because I can't tell you how much I would like to be able to hibernate for a year. That was why I loved it. So I was like, do you know what? Like, yes, she's horrible to Reva. Like, she's a bit of a bad friend. But if I would, oh my God, what I would. Do you know what? Like you, I really struggle with sleep my whole life. I'm just a terrible insomniac. Earlier this year, I had a small medical procedure and I was given a general anesthetic where they put you to sleep. For the first time in my life, I'd never had one before. And that was the greatest experience of my whole entire life. I have like barely stopped thinking about it because it was just nothingness. Like it was like the first time in my whole life where my head, like it was quiet. There was nothing. It was just like it's actually what I imagine. The closest thing I think you could get to death would be a general anesthetic. And it was so peaceful. I nearly cried when I woke up because I was like, oh my God, now the shit starts again. And so my year of rest and relaxation, I know how that feels to just want to have to, if I had the privilege, if I had the money, like if I didn't have to worry about working and I had everything I needed and I could just put it on auto pay, fuck yes, I would absolutely do what I could to try and hibernate for a year. That's why that book really resonated with me. I just thought, oh, I get that. That is an attractive idea. Not in a sad girl way, not in anything like that. Just like, I understand the desire to want to have to just turn things off for a period of time and wake up on the other side when the shit's finished.
Yeah.
I definitely get that.
I mean, that's what Michael Jackson did. I mean, that's what a lot of people do. I've had 2 surgeries, and I know what you're talking about. I will look forward to my next time going under the knife or whatever. There's another thing that I've discovered, this is really fucked up, but I had really bad pneumonia last fall, and my fever was so high that I was tripping. Like I could hear my brain squeaking every time I used it. And I knew I'm recircuiting something here. And I was really hopeful that if I could survive it, like the pain was excruciating, but if I could survive it, I would somehow come out of this fixed. And that's what really reminded me of my year of rest and relaxation. Because the truth is, everything that we're reading that she's narrating for us, she's awake. I mean, it would be a blank book if she was about her really being asleep. And I think that her waking hours were pretty fucking painful. So, was it the fact that she hibernated for so long? Is that why she could find peace on the other side? Or did she just get through whatever the fuck she was going through? Or did she damage her brain enough that she just can't remember her suffering or her reasons for being unhappy? Who knows?
The age she was at too is like, I've theorized about this so much, but it could even just be like the amount you change in a year.
Right.
That is drastic at that time of your life. Like you're in your 20s, every single year, you're a different person, a completely different person than you were the year before until you reach your 30s and you're finally like somewhat of a functioning human being. Could be the passage of time, potentially. Or even like, the freedom of not having to make choices, like having somebody else make the choices for you. I know what that feels like too. Sometimes if you're exhausted and your cup is empty and you do not have the capacity to even decide what to have for dinner that day, like that's too hard. Like that's exhausting to think. I hate that, having to think of, oh fuck, dinner again, like another day where I have to think of what I'm going to eat. Just having those decisions taken care of for you, like your plan, this is the plan for a certain number of months, these are the motions that you're going through. I can imagine that would be quite therapeutic, even in those waking hours, like when she's doing sit-ups so her muscles don't atrophy.
Yeah. I mean, it is rest and relaxation. That's a real thing. I don't know anyone who relaxes and rests.
We don't know how. We don't know how. We're literally not even allowed anymore. Like Apple Watch, I have one and I can't wear it anymore because it stresses me out. Like I'm like, just having it on me feels like a phone and and I thought that would happen. I was like, if I get this, it's going to stress me out, but I did anyway, and it does. So I know that you've said in the past that you kind of, and on your Substack as well, in your Q&As, you write to interrogate the contradictions of being human and how that fascinates you, which I had never thought of it that way either, but that is what draws me to it. Like, why do we do the things we do? Why do we sabotage ourselves if we want something? Why do we make life so difficult for ourselves if we don't need to? Or why don't we just leave a situation? After all the novels that you've written and your short story collections and your essays, do you feel you're any closer to understanding human behavior or these contradictions?
Oh, that's a really beautiful question. I don't know if it's because of what I've written. I think it might more be because of what I've lived through and all of the ways that I've shown myself that I didn't know things in the past. You know, at every moment we can only know what we know. And I know back then I didn't. Thought I knew, I did not. And this idea that we have any control. I don't know anything, actually. I know nothing. I know when I'm tired. That's kind of the only thing that I can be like, that's a true thing to know. I don't know. No, that's not really true. But everything changes so much. Like you said, in 1 year in your 20s is like a lifetime. I think that I have become slightly more comfortable in myself. Slightly. I think that I definitely like myself much better. Whether I respect myself more is hard to say. Probably a fraction improvement. Do I have respect for other people? I think I do have more. I think I have more compassion for other people and other people's lives. Just sort of imagining that everyone has their own story. Everyone is their own narrator, protagonist. And life is weird. And you can't just look at someone and know. You can't ever assume that you know. And I think probably when I was like a teenager in my early 20s, I just thought I knew everything. Now I know I don't. So I guess I've learned that.
That is such a scary thing, isn't it? That in our teens we are the most self-assured and confident. It's a wonder to me that any of us survive to adulthood, truly.
But we need to be that way. It's what gives us the courage to survive it.
That's true.
That
is true. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, it's just occurring to me now that I don't get another chance. Oh, this is permanent. Like, this day is over. I don't get to go back. I mean, that's like the beautiful thing about being young is that you feel like you have so many chances,
It's interesting what you were saying earlier about Vesta and death in her hands and how she's realizing that she squandered this one short life that she has, which I feel like is a huge fear that we all have, is the fear that we're not living our life to its most fullest. And that actually feels like quite a heavy thing for you to be working on at the same time as you're wrapping up or like completing your short story collection, which was such a quite significant project for you. Did writing about Vesta's grief over a lost life, did that give you more of an appreciation for the passage of time? Do you think that stayed with you?
No.
I appreciate your honesty.
I don't know what that book did to me. It was really in reference to so much of what I might project that by writing the book, I knew I wasn't wasting my life. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
I was solving the problem by writing about the problem. I don't know. I had so much energy back then. I mean, this was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. I'm 44 now, and I know that I do too many things at once, but I can remember just being so pregnant with energy that was like, if I don't do this today, I'm going to explode. And I live for those days now. I mean, those are the most fun, but I can feel that my, and in a way it's maturity, right? Because there's a certain thoughtfulness and pause to taking your time. Not everything is an emergency these days. So that's nice.
You write so vividly about the grotesque and sublime aspects of embodiment and having a body and the torture of being a body. Has that exploration brought you any closer to a sense of catharsis? Because I know you've spoken before about how you've processed your own feelings and that the feeling of being trapped inside having a body through your work. Has it helped you reach a sort of sense of peace or contentment?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really think so. No, I don't think that there is anything that can rise above the body. I think the body is the truth. Has like my relationship with feeling trapped in my body shifted? Yes and no. I mean, I don't know. Are your parents still alive?
Luckily,
Yeah,
yes.
mine are too. And watching my parents age, I've been a witness to that in a way that, because I don't live with them, I see them, sometimes just once a year. I can see the aging process. And it just becomes more and more clear to me that it's not so much like the body is a trap, it's a vehicle, Like I know my mom's in there, but that isn't my mom, if that makes any sense. So
Yeah,
I know I'm inside of me and I'm identifying more with that than with like, here I am with all my imperfections. I don't know. I think about it a lot less. So maybe that there is some freedom in having just written it to death.
This year I turned 31, which is the same age as my parents separated when I was very little. But when they were married, they were 31 when they had me. And I am not going to have children. I don't want to have my own children. But turning the age that they were when they had me felt like a very confronting moment of, I always thought they were so old. And they were very old parents. Like being 31 was quite old to be having a baby. And so turning 31 and knowing I'm not going to have my own baby is like entering into this next chapter of, well, what's my life going to be then?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's my life going to mean? And I hope it means art and writing, but I relate to Vesta in that way as well, and all your characters really, of what is the point and what is this for, and who are, those sorts of identity crises. So yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying as well about seeing your parents age. I've seen that too, and it's quite scary. It's quite confronting, like realizing that life is finite.
Mm-hmm.
You always think that we're going to be here forever, I guess, while simultaneously being so afraid of death and dying,
Mm-hmm.
which, yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing. How has your relationship to the craft of writing, changed throughout the course of your career, from McGlue to Lapvona to your current novel?
Oh, tremendously, tremendously. I mean, it takes writing a couple of novels to start being able to hold a novel in your mind, and seeing it from afar as a project. And, sort of like a symphony is you can't conceive when you're like working on arrangement of all these harmonies, you can't conceive of like the entire thing, but maybe thematically you're aware, you're in tune. But I guess I feel like there was a time where I felt drawn to be more of a traditional novelist, in terms of here's where the story should go, and then it should go here and then here and here and here. Now I'm more driven by like what feels good. Like I can't really tolerate writing things that are boring to me. So, and actually writing for film has really helped in terms of looking at craft and pacing and what to put in and what to take out. There's a lot that doesn't need to be there, I guess. And so what is there is, yeah, really carefully considered. But what have I learned? I don't know. I mean, I think it's only really demonstrable. It's only really demonstrated in the work. I don't know how to talk about it.
I find it interesting that you've referenced visual ideas for some of your work, like Eileen being very film noir and Lapvona almost being like a folktale fairy tale. And even as we were speaking earlier about Death in Her Hands and how it evokes, Twin Peaks as well. Like there's quite a strong thread or visual theme, like film themes and styles throughout your work. Do you conceive of a project, or when you're thinking about a new project, does it appear visually to you? Are you thinking about that look and feel and the tone and style before you start working on it?
No, I think it's something that I discover, like you chip away at it until it starts to reveal itself. And then you can kind of see like, oh, I know where this is going. I know what this is going to be. I mean, the thing that I'm working on now is interesting because, of course it's interesting because I'm doing it, or else I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't interesting. What intrigues me about it is that I had this instinct that had something to do with soap opera. And it wasn't something I realized from the start. I had been working on the book for like a year and realized that there was a missing element just in my own conception of the project. And then I looked at the first paragraph and it was like spelled right out for me, So sometimes it's like the most immediate thing is the deepest or even most sophisticated or abstract or subtle.
I'm so excited for this when it comes out, because even just that alone, like the idea, especially because I've read that your next project is based on a fictional town similar to Brighton. I mean, hearing soap opera, I'm immediately thinking, Emmerdale, Coronation Street, and that's very exciting to see how, I guess, that those elements might come through or show up.
Yeah, I hope you're surprised.
I want to be surprised. I think that's what I've come to expect from you, I guess, is not that I expect you to shock me every time, but like I definitely am always surprised by how different each of your works is. And so in that way, I'm looking forward to being surprised. You've once described yourself as someone who abandons things often, but that seems so hard to believe given you've written so many novels, which is such a commitment. This might have been from an older interview, but do you think that that is true of yourself today?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I have nightmares about that kind of stuff. And I still have nightmares about like forgetting to go to class and then having to take a test. Like I'm a very vigilant person. I mean, I make lists of things to do every day that would make anyone cry. They're so boring. I mean, it's literally like put on your shoes, I really don't like forgetting things. I don't like leaving things hanging. But maybe what I meant was there are a lot of things I have ideas for and don't do, because just because you have an idea doesn't mean you should dedicate years of your life to it, or even 10 minutes. There are lots of good ideas. It's all about how you execute something. You could have a bad idea and execute it brilliantly, and it could be great.
How do you decide when an idea is worth executing?
How scary it is. How much it scares me personally. How much I don't know how to do it. Like, okay, that I have no clue. Let's do it. Let's just start.
That's so cool because it's so counterintuitive.
Well, it's yes, it is counterintuitive. You're totally right. And it's something that there are certain authorial decisions that you can make about your life, like that are you forcing yourself into something, not what you would just organically do. But that's one thing that I decided about my own life, is that I was going to seek that out, which is dangerous. But I think creatively, it's probably not as extreme as it sounds, because whoever is coming up with the idea is the same person who's seeking the scariest version of an idea. And I'm not going to destroy that part of my life on purpose. Also, I don't really think writing is really, really hard. But what's the worst that happens when you write? I mean, you lose time. It's not like, oh God, I wasted all of this paint, or I wasted all of these people's time, or I wasted so much money on this film or whatever. I can't imagine having to deal with things like that creatively.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. My biggest fear with writing, because I've confronted this a lot, I'm like, what is the block? I'm working on a manuscript, but like it's so early on in its infancy. But my biggest fear is that what I feel like is my reason for being or my way of processing the world, that I am going to be terrible at it. And then who am I? Like that is like my biggest fear in this world, is what does that mean for me and my identity if I turn out to be a terrible writer? But then I also think, well, why do I care? If it's how I'm processing the world and filtering my emotions, then why do I care so much?
I mean, it's true. I think you're very wise to preface all of this with my manuscript is in its infancy, because nothing is perfect from the beginning. I mean, I can look back at old drafts of the thing I'm working on now, and I'm like, how did I ever think this was going to be good? And somehow I stuck with it. You know, like, this is so bogus, but I kept investing. That's the only way to do it.
At what stage of your drafting process do you invite somebody in to review or feedback on your work?
Final draft. The draft that I share with people is the draft that I send my book agent.
Wow.
I mean, occasionally, you know, I'm married to a writer, and occasionally I'm like, can you just listen to this? Like, what does this sound like this? You know, does this make sense? Occasionally, you know, but I really believe in, you know, keeping the lid on the pot while it's on the stove.
I'm very curious to know, how do you feel about being called a quote-unquote literary it girl?
I think that's pretty lucky. I mean, what's an it girl?
It's a very good question.
Well, first of all, it's you can't be an old lady. You probably have to be kind of cool and like semi-attractive. So I'm flattered. I guess it's like, yeah, girls, women don't just automatically get respect and attention. So when one of us gets some respect and some attention, it's kind of a big deal. Maybe. Is that true? I don't know. I always go back and forth on this, because I feel like, yes, we live in such a patriarchal world. And then I look at like the books that are coming out. They're all by women. I mean, a majority of them, like especially novels. So I don't really know. I mean, yeah, I don't usually harp so much on the gender thing. Like, I actually try to avoid it, but just in today's
it is relevant
conversation,
it is.
I don't know. It's been coming up. It girl. I mean, yeah, no, I mean, that's fine. And like that's really nice, actually. And you know, I could be like, oh no, now there's this pressure on me to keep up this identity or whatever. But I would be doing what I'm doing anyway, you know? So
I think it's because of that you are considered a literary it girl. I think that it is so refreshing to see an artist, a creative, where you just literally do what you want to do. Like, that is so refreshing. I know if I ever read about you or see that you've, like, your recent auction at the Chinese restaurant, I just know, like, you are going to do what you're going to do, and it's born from your own brain. You're not, I don't ever get the sense that anything you're doing is because you've been pressured into it or told you have to do something by a publisher or an agent or anything. I never get that sense from you, and that, I think, is so rare in today's world, and that's what makes you so enigmatic and interesting and intriguing, and probably very deserving of the label literary it girl. Who or what inspires you creatively these days?
I don't know. It's really hard to say. I feel like I'm not aware. I'm not so aware as to be able to say. I mean, there are a lot of things that are influencing me, but inspiration feels different. What motivates me is hope. I mean, that's really the thing that I depend on. And when I don't have hope, I don't want to write. And sometimes when I don't have hope and I write, I find it.
And lastly, what do you hope readers take away from your work?
Any experience of self-discovery at all. Even like, I hate this font. Like, now you know that about yourself.
Yeah.
Good enough. You didn't know that before. Only you know what font you hate.
I think that's true. I think a lot of people need to sit with that, actually. Like, what's coming up for you?
Right.
What are you learning about yourself?
Right.
Okay, well, it has been truly such an honor to chat with you, and I am really such a huge fan. I feel so lucky to be existing at a time where not only am I able to appreciate and enjoy your work, but also to sit here and talk to you about it. So
That's so nice.
honestly, thank you so much. Please keep producing art. As long as you are, I will read anything you write. It's really such an honor. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you, truly. And I haven't been talking to many people since I've been in this isolated Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. So it's especially nice to connect.
Oh, I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased. Thanks so much for listening to Six Sad Lit. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really loved it, leaving a quick review helps other readers and writers find the show. And if you want to keep the conversation going, come hang out with us in the Six Sad Friends Discord book club. Come for the books, stay for the friends. You'll find the link in the show notes below. Until next time, thanks for listening.